Okay, we are finally going to talk about turbocharging and supercharging. For those of you that want to listen. For those of you who don't want to listen, I'm still going to talk about it. That's how that works because it's not a conditional thing. Yeah.
Are we still going to have to work out at the same time?
Next year?
Yes.
Yeah, everything's about the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus or minus a few minutes.
It's just the most reals that changed.
Yeah.
It's just online.
All right, turbocharging and supercharging. I can't write. I hurt my arm trying to get some oil pressure. Yeah, just kidding.
You got Louis.
Do you want to talk about that?
19.
Huh?
Huh?
Do you want to talk about this?
No, I'm good.
Really? Well, I think we should tell the story.
Yeah,
Now
now
you
we're
gotta
curious.
tell
Okay, you got one more PSI.
Oh, you know how you have to get oil pressure on the engine by turning it over?
Yeah.
And they each got 19, 19, and 19. And I'm like, well, let's see if the old man can beat that. So once I hit 20, I was out.
It hit it for like half a second.
But it did.
You're at 12.
I have that Benjamin Button's disease or whatever the hell it is. So I get younger. All right, that says turbocharging and supercharging. Sorry, because my arm got hurt. That's what that says. Let's try it again. We'll just edit this part out. S-U-P-E-R, supper charging. C-H-A-R-G-I.
We're charging up supper.
Really neat.
There. I can do it if I have to.
Look at that.
Would you like it like that all the time? Takes absolute concentration. Let's talk about air and density. Air and density. Because that's what turbocharging and supercharging is really all about. Right? As we go up in the atmosphere, we start losing pressure and the horsepower starts
Dropping.
significantly declining. So we want to get that horsepower back, horse pressure, some people call it. Most cars have turbochargers on them nowadays, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you can make smaller and smaller engines.
Now they're coming out with three-cylinder. The new Toyotas, the turbocharged three-cylinder.
Really?
Yeah.
Makes 200 and something horsepower. It's a lot.
At what RPM though?
Like,
All of it.
yeah. Yeah, it's something crazy.
Red line right there. It's all right. You have to. This says seal level pressure, so I go with that. You have to excuse me. I'm a little sad right now because I was on Facebook and I saw some meme about making fun of people who drive electric cars, and then all these ladies chimed in afterwards about how. Yeah, no kidding. I would, if I ever met a guy who drove an electric car, that would be like a huge red flag. I would never date him. Yeah, me neither. Why would you date? I'm like,
You shouldn't have to worry about that, though. You're married.
I know, but I always have to keep my options open. You never know what could happen.
Dog on the leash can still bark.
You put it anyway, coward.
All right, sea level pressure on a standard day. Sea level pressure on a standard
19.92 inches.
standard day. What's the temperature?
29. 15 degrees Celsius.
All right, no, 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 C. Nobody really knows what 15 C feels like, do you?
59 degrees Celsius.
I was just going to see if it was a catch that. What do you think 15 degrees Celsius is like in Fahrenheit? Oh, look, Kevin's about 70. 15 C is, all right, what was that again? 29.92 inches of mercury, which is Hg, inches of mercury. Or, how many PSI? 14.7 PSI. All right, so I don't have to, waste all this time writing 29.92. I could write 30 inches, right? Round up to 30. So I could write that. We'll round to 30. Because I'll always say we can round up to 30 inches, right? So if I say 30 inches, you know what I'm talking about. And then I'm going to write a bunch of stuff. I'm probably going to say, why did I bother doing this? Boyle's law. In any sample of gas, the volume is inversely proportional to the absolute pressure if the temp is kept constant. B-O-Y-L-E, Boyle's law. Or, as you guys will probably want to go with it, uh-oh, this is not going to be good.
Oh,
Oh, there it is.
Lonnie.
Boyle's law. My pen was out of ink.
Yeah.
Boyle's law, in any sample of gas, in any sample of gas, what I was going to say is you guys might want to call it Boyle's suggestion because, you know, it comes and goes.
There's no such thing as laws.
They're meant to be broken. The volume is inversely, which means it's the opposite.
The volume.
The volume, V-O-L-U-M-E, is in...
Two volumes.
The volume is inversely proportional. Do you want it neat or do you want the right words? Because you only get one or the other. I can't do both. If you want me to spell it right, that's all, then everything goes out. Let's see, example, the volume is inversely proportional to the absolute pressure, if the temp is kept constant. If the temp is kept constant. All right, well, we can unpack that a little bit and think about it. A sample of gas. So we have a sample of gas. The volume is inversely proportional to the pressure. So if we half the pressure, then the volume will increase. Now, inversely. So if the volume is proportional to that, so let's go with pressure. So if we half the pressure, that'll be the volume. But that's in an enclosed container. And we're not dealing with an enclosed container. So why did I write that? Who knows? We'll keep going. Talking about, okay. So 13, let me see where we're going. Okay, 13 cubic feet. I told you I'm probably going to regret even going off this topic. Of air at 14.7 psi. Weighs how much?
I don't know.
Weighs 1 pound. What weighs more? A pound of air or a pound of butane?
Butane.
Know which weighs more?
They're both a pound.
The air does because the butane's a lighter fluid.
Denser.
Flick.
Oh my God. Oscar.
Just confusing Oscar.
Come on, man. Wait, you got the King of the Hill statement for that one? You Bobby Hill?
No, I didn't get the quote, but
Oh, Bobby Hill. My daddy says butane's a bastard gas.
so he said butane lighter.
I did say that, but in King of the Hill, Bobby said that. My daddy says butane's. Okay, at 10 psi. I hope this makes sense because you need 10 psi. You need 15 cubic feet of air. Cubic feet of air to weigh, W-E-I-G, weigh 1 pound. All right, yeah, this is making sense. Follow?
So at a lower pressure, you need more air to weigh the same.
Yep. So 13 cubic feet of air at standard atmosphere down here, got 1 pound. So what's 13 cubic feet?
13 feet by 13 feet by 13 feet.
There we go. So 13 cubic feet. Well, if we decrease that pressure to 10, now we're going to need 15 cubic feet.
Oh, man.
Okay? And when we're talking about fuel to air ratios, we should be talking about the weight, actually, not volume, but weight. But this gives you kind of both. So you can see that right now we're starting to go less and less and less. let me see. Or we could say, let me see, cubic feet at 10 psi. Well, we can do the same thing at 20 psi. 20 psi. 15 cubic feet would weigh how much? We just doubled the pressure.
Half a pound?
No, now I sound like the president. Doubled the pressure.
2 pounds?
Half a pound.
So now double the psi, same cubic feet,
Double pounds.
double the pounds.
Directly?
I thought it was inversely.
That's an
It's sample. I know, that's why I shouldn't have said that. It's enclosed container. I shouldn't have gone off that one. In fact, I should even put a note there. Like, why? Okay to skip.
Any sample of gas in an enclosed container?
There. We'll just skip that next year. They'll never know about it. All right. Well, let's try this one. As altitude increases, this sounds more important. As altitude increases. Yeah, I shouldn't have even gone with that because it talks about in a sample of gas and it talks about a specific volume. You know, in aviation, we're not talking about a specific volume of gas. We're just out in the atmosphere. It's not, we don't have a tank of gas with us, right? Well, we have a tank of gas. It's a different kind of thing.
That's got vents on it.
That's totally different, yes. That's liquid. So as altitude increases, pressure and density do what?
Decrease.
All right, now we're on the same page. Decrease. And the temperature does what?
Decrease.
Goes up because we get close to the sun, right?
Yeah.
It,
Of course, that's exactly how it works.
yeah, it's how the whole thing works. It gets colder.
Burn up in space.
It gets colder than hotter.
What is, do you know what it's a thing called the standard lapse rate. Have we talked about that?
I think so.
That's how much colder it gets as we go.
Yes.
So how much colder does it get?
2 degrees Celsius.
2 degrees
or
Celsius.
1,000
feet.
feet.
2 degrees per thousand until we hit the
Stratosphere.
tropopause, right? Tropopause. And then it tends. Am I right on that? And then it tends to. Come on, Michael, you're a pilot.
I
You
know,
should be
it
right.
changes then.
You're a pilot.
Now
And
he's
then it-
thinking about food.
I never get up that high.
And then it
I
gets.
never.
Wait, not in your 172. You're not with the tropopause. That's because you don't have a turbocharger. We're gonna get you up there pretty soon. Okay. Density. Where am I here? Density decrease. Okay. Yeah, that's a fact. As altitude increases, pressure and density decrease. So we have here at sea level. Ooh, this is fun here. At sea level. We'll call that 100% because we're at sea level.
What does it change to?
Huh?
So what's the increase after the tropical?
Stratosphere.
Yeah, but what's
Well, the temperature.
Oh, it stays pretty stagnant.
the,
Yeah,
okay.
So you just.
I guess. I never go up there. I'm afraid of heights. All right, so we're going to talk about.
gravity.
So if we call it sea levels 100%, let's consider this engine. We'll consider Pratt & Whitney 985. 985, anybody know what that is? 9-cylinder radial engine. Has 450 horsepower. Okay, so talk about that. So at sea level, how much horsepower does this Pratt & Whitney 985 have?
450.
450. Now we're going to assume here for a minute that this Pratt & Whitney 985, this is a really bad example as I'm thinking about it, because it's supercharged. Well, let's just pretend like it's not. Let's just say O200. Well, okay, then we'd have to do the math on that one. So O200, so that has how many horsepower?
200.
It's 200 cubic inches.
Let's go horsepower now.
This is going to be hard horsepower to manage. That's 100 horsepower.
Okay.
So at sea level, we have 100 horsepower. See, now here's where it all starts to fall apart.
That's easy.
Okay,
100 and 100.
okay. At 10,000 feet, that would have 50% less horsepower. So if this Pratt & Whitney 985 wasn't supercharged and it was just normally aspirated, it would be down to 225. But of course, our O200 is now at 50 horsepower. And this would be in what kind of a plane would a O200?
150?
No, 140 have a C85.
150.
150. 152 has a 120, the 235 in it. So we're talking one Cessna 150. And I don't have any Cessna 150 drivers in here, do I? Trying to think what the service ceiling on that airplane is. I think I had mine up to 7,000 feet. What's that?
I want to say it's like a max of 8, maybe 9 if you're really lucky.
Yeah, like I said, I had mine up to 7,000. You're flying like that, you know, so. Exaggerating. All right, so if we weighted up to 20,000 in our, in our 150, we're down to 33% horsepower, which in the, if we had 450 horsepower to start with, we'd be down to 148. And if I can do the math in my head really quick here, 100% would be 33 horsepower. And then if we actually made it all the way up to 40,000, we'd be at 25%. So that we'd be down to 115. So now we're talking about the same horsepower right here as a Cessna 152. And of course, you'd be down to 25 horsepower in your little Cessna 150. So that's not good, is it? And, you know, we obviously, in our day and age, there's not a whole lot of piston engines flying around at 40,000 feet. You have the kind of money to get to 40,000 feet, you're flying a turbine. But we go back to World War II and such. I mean, where were they flying the bombers at? Does anybody know offhand? Storm?
I want to say 17 to 25.
Okay.
I want to say 25 because they were using O2 on those big bombers.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So.
Then we got into what was the one that dropped? The Enola Gay was the
B-29.
29.
Yeah,
that was a
that one could operate, I believe, probably 35.
that was pressurized,
Yeah,
right?
no, that was pressurized. Had remote control turrets on it too.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Okay. So
3180 or 850.
31,000.
31,850.
That's very specific, but okay. So yeah, they're getting up there, right? During World War II, and the piston engines, they're flying around at least over 20. I don't think it's that uncommon to hear about a piston aircraft flying in the flight levels, which is over 18,000. So you're in IFR world. So yeah, they're getting up there, but you're not going to do it normally aspirated too much. Okay, so heat. Let's talk about heat though. So all right, well, we can just look at that and go, okay, so it makes sense. Turbocharging is going to make sense if we can somehow get this 50 to no longer be 50, but if we could get this back upwards to, there we go, back, even 80%, then we're going to shoot this back up to 80% of that number, which I don't have in my head right now. Well, 80 over here, yeah, so 80, so we're back looking good. So we just need a turbocharged Cessna 150, all right? We're back to 80% of the 450, which I don't know off the top of my head because I just threw these numbers out here. But obviously, if we could somehow do that, then hey, then that's fantastic. So good. So that's what turbocharging, supercharging is going to buy us. It's going to restore that power that we're losing just by going up in altitude. And,
Sorry, you totally just came out of nowhere with your math. Your math's perfect. 360.
thank you. So we back up to 360. It doesn't make them weird. It makes them smart. All right. Okay. But we have a problem here that we're going to face very quickly. So I'll just jump at it right now and tell you where this problem is. So turbocharging, supercharging is good. Well, if it's good, a little bit's good. More's got to be better, right? No. And we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but there's different kinds of turbocharging, supercharging. So we're going to, I don't know if I define this stuff, but yeah, I'll define it. But I'll just throw this at you, just to keep things simple so we're talking the same language. So when I talk a supercharger, we're going to be talking about a mechanical compressor that is run off of a belt or a gear. It can be like a roots blower, which I'll show you, yeah, it's compressors that actually kind of go like that. I have a picture somewhere. Or we could be talking about a centrifugal type supercharger that radial engines would have, where it comes in the middle and it goes out, just like a turbine engine, right?
Like
you guys
turbo.
have, okay, or like a turbo, but it's just driven off of gears, pulleys, levers, and stuff like that. And then we talk turbocharger. And I'm strictly talking turbo, something that's driven off exhaust gases. So when we talk about turbos, and if we're gonna have, and I'll write all this down, we're gonna definitely define them out. So aircraft come in a couple different flavors. One of them is called turbo normalizing.
Oh,
All right, and that would be like if I had an engine, an aircraft that was turbo normalized. I'm sitting out here on the runway, and as I hit full power and take off, it's gonna the engine's basically gonna say like, "Hey, we're at sea level. This is nice." And then I'm gonna climb up to 100 feet, and the engines go, "We're still at sea level. This is nice." And we're gonna go up to 1,000 feet, and 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. The engine's gonna say, "I'm at sea level. This is cool." And that's all it gets. It goes up sea level until we get to some point 10,000, 14,000 feet. And then from there it goes, okay, we're 14,000 sea level. This is cool. Go up 14.5. It's like, whoa, we just went up 500 feet because it stops at 14. So 14.5 is like 500 to it. 15,000 is like 1,000. See what I'm saying there? So that's just turbo normalized. All right, and then we have turbo supercharged. We're on the ground. You know, a normally aspirated engine, you're looking at 30 inches of manifold pressure at wide open, or turbo normalized, 30 inches is most it's ever going to get. But then you get this turbo supercharged where you put the power to it and you'll watch that go, you know, whoa, 30, 35, 36, 37, 38, you know, inches. So it's actually pressing a lot of air in there. And then, of course, it's way beyond, it's boosted, is what we say. So talking about the turbo normalized, well, it's like, well, why did we stop at 14? You know, I mean, that's not that high. Why couldn't they just keep it going? Why not? Why did they set this turbo normalizing at such a low altitude? Why not make it 20,000? Wouldn't that have been much nicer? Well, you have limitations because we're compressing air. And when you compress air, it gets hot. All right? You start adding a bunch of hot air, we're going to start losing efficiency. Engine starts running higher. So we have the problem there. And not only that, heat, it causes density to the less dense air, is what I should say. So heat has the opposite effect. So heat is the opposite effect. Oh geez, and I wrote one of these stupid things. Maybe I won't write it. Charles' law: if a temperature of a given quantity of gas is raised and the pressure is held constant, the gas will expand in proportion to the absolute temperature. I'm not going to write that. I'm just going to do this because this is focused more on what we're talking about. Hot air will expand. Hot air will expand. Hot air will expand. Yeah. But weight remains the same. In other words, for a given sample of gas, I heat it up, it will expand, but it weighs the exact same amount. So you didn't gain anything. It's just going to take, follow? Right?
You can take up more air.
You're going to take more of that air to satisfy what the engine wanted. So if we're actually doing the proper fuel ratios, air weight to fuel weight, not volume, because we really want weight, right? That's where we got into the whole pressure carbs with the sensing the weight with the impact versus, you're like, oh, please don't go back to that, right? That was all about weight and not volume. Where a carburetor was strictly volume. That's why we had trouble. We had to control it a little bit closer. All right. So hot air will expand. Weight remains the same. Let's see. Well, that's kind of what I just said. So this is why carb heat. What happens when I pull carb heat on? Mm-hmm. Shows a loss of power. By the way, I rebuilt the carburetor air box on my airplane. So before I rebuilt it, when I pull carb heat on, I would get about 100 and 150 RPM drop. I'm about 250, I think now. Yeah,
So
because
that's actually working.
it's really working, which is to say that I'm more cold now when I'm in normal. Yeah. So, all right, and the whole point of this was excessive heat from turbo or compression, any type of compression. I could just cross that out and put compression. meaning any type, supercharger, turbocharger, whatever I want, is not desirable. It's not desirable. Well, what happens? Well, it lowers the turbo effect. Meaning that you got to have more air now. So it got hot, so we need more air. So you're going to compress more air. You're going to get more heat, and the whole thing just kind of runs away. So at some point you kind of go, well, we're at the point of diminishing returns. Let's just stop doing this. Also, what happens to hot air going in the engine? What is my big concern? Detonation. Causes detonation. So at 500 degrees F, fuel, I'll put fuel light off. That's much faster than compression causes heat, and if the air is hot enough, 500 degrees, the fuel will ignite. All right, so circling back around to what I just talked about some definitions. We have a ground-boosted engine. It is boosted on the ground. An engine that has a manifold pressure above atmospheric on the ground. So an engine that has a manifold pressure above atmospheric. On the ground. When I say on the ground, I'm talking sea level. I should put that, but actually it wouldn't matter. It's above it's above atmospheric on the ground, so it doesn't matter if I'm in Denver and the atmospheric pressure is low. I'm boosting it above that. What is the maximum manifold pressure I'm going to pull out of a normally aspirated engine?
Whatever the engine holds.
At sea level, what's the maximum I'm going to get?
Just below. Just below.
1 inch below.
1 inch below. So what is standard day?
29.92.
We round it to
30.
30.
30. So what's the most I'm going to expect to see? 29 inches. That's it. What happens as I start rolling down the runway? What's my manifold pressure going to do? Yeah, why is it going to go up?
Ram air.
Because you have ram air.
Ram air plus propeller effect going into the induction system. It's a little tiny bit of
It's
turbocharging.
closer to 30, right?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
Closer to, but it's not. It will never reach 30. Why
It
not?
never will.
Venturi.
Because they have a Venturi restriction. Well, wait a minute. What about the continental fuel injection?
Still has a very
It still has a Venturi?
No.
There's no Venturi in that one. So why am I still losing some?
You have a restriction.
What's my restriction?
The fuel metering orifice.
That's for fuel.
The air metering
The air metering orifice? Are you just going to make up terms all night for me over here? Where is the air metering orifice in a continental fuel injection? Okay, then.
Maybe it's the throttle valve?
You still have a throttle valve. You still have bends. You still have...
Sound like an air meter.
I know, yeah. It sounded good, didn't it? I mean, I got to hand it to him. When he throws out stuff, he at least puts things together that really sound good, you know? All right. Let's see. Turbo normalized. He's still more an amateur.
Kevin has raised a lot of kids. He's probably seen skilled and unskilled.
Altitude engine. I don't call it that. Some people do. Turbo normalized or an altitude engine. I don't know why they call it that. Turbo normalized, I can say that. And go, oh yeah, it makes perfect sense. If I say altitude engine, like altitude. You got to convert that to something, right? It's carry the one. I don't know what the hell. So that's a type of engine that uses a turbocharger or supercharger to generate sea level pressure at its intake manifold up to the critical altitude. So a type of engine type of engine that does something. Okay. Uses a turbocharger or supercharger. Turbocharger or supercharger to generate sea level pressure in the intake manifold up to critical altitude, up to its critical altitude. Great. What is critical altitude then? Exactly. The altitude which it doesn't. Altitude at which an engine no longer can produce sea level horsepower. So the altitude at which an engine can no longer produce sea level horsepower. At which an engine can no longer produce sea level horsepower. All right.
So it's got like a wastegate on there or something, so it's going to be open up until that critical altitude.
Not necessarily, really.
Oh,
We'll
so
get to
that
that.
would work.
Yeah. Well, so what's the critical altitude of my airplane?
I don't know. What is it, Kevin?
38,000.
8,000.
About a few.
It's about,
About 15.
it's around 12.
12 to 1201.
Just take it from experience, the manifold pressure dropping down, it seems like 12 probably is.
About 12,000. Remember, it's an 0470. It's got a carburetor. So my critical altitude got 12,000.
I'm going with
12. Anybody else want to chime in? Huh?
12 and a half.
12 and a half thousand.
11.5.
Do I hear $1? One foot. You can't go over.
Maybe it's higher.
20,000.
Let's think this through. The altitude at which an engine can no longer produce sea level horsepower.
Wait, anywhere,
Oh,
what?
please.
Anywhere above sea level.
Anywhere above sea level.
Yeah.
So if I'm sitting here taking off from this airport, I'm at 75 feet. I'm already past my critical altitude by 75 feet. Right?
Indeed.
Okay. Yeah, 12,000 feet. I'm probably, well, go back to that. Where am I? 50%?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is how my rolls go.
Yeah. At 10,000 feet, I'm at, so, yeah.
Yeah, way below.
So, well, I start with about 225, so 80% of that.
170?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So you must be right. So, yeah. All right. Normally aspirated engine, that altitude is anything over sea level. That makes sense, hopefully. Anything over sea, yeah. So as soon as you've left sea level, you have lost your critical. That's,
Too bad, so sad.
yeah. So what are you going to do about it?
Put a turbo on it.
Get an electric airplane and girls don't date you.
Yeah. But you have an airplane now.
They didn't, I guess that didn't factor in.
Yeah.
No. And a supercharged engine. What's critical altitude of this supercharged engine?
Say 15,000.
Honest, whatever they decide it's going to be.
No limit.
Yeah, well, there's a limit, definitely. Supercharged engine or turbocharged, that altitude.
Supercharged. It's gonna be
is much higher. That's all I can tell you. All right, I have to look up the aircraft specific. So specific aircraft would say, look at the POH, critical altitude is 10,000. Well, it's 10,000. It's 14, it's 14. If it's 5, it's 5. So whatever they want it to be, it's however they designed it. Okay, so supercharging. Supercharging. Because you will see in turbocharged engines, turbo supercharge, or you see turbocharge. It's going to depend on the manufacturer what they're talking about. So I kind of like to bring it all together and just say, okay, if we say it's turbocharged, then it's a generic term. If you say turbo supercharged, then it's boosted above. So supercharging. So that is boosting the manifold. Oh, you don't want to go super duper charged. Boosting the manifold. Manifold pressure over 30 inches.
Spaceball.
When I talk about the manifold pressure, what am I talking about? What area specifically?
Intake right above the throttle.
Past the throttle plate.
That's the throttle before the
Throttle, 2 cylinders.
Yeah.
That's manifold. Before the throttle, that's going to be something else. Now that's going to tell you what we're talking about. Let's see, we're supercharging. How is this done? This is done. Oh, sorry, that just didn't work out. With a compressor. That is gear driven or, hang on, let's see.
What's that first word?
Done. Done with a compressor that is DONE. Done with a compressor that is gear, or you could say belt. Gear, belt, or exhaust gas. Exhaust driven. Right? Turbo.
But not supercharged.
Not necessarily. I'm talking about how do you supercharge something? How do you
I
get?
thought you were defining supercharging as belt driven, specifically belt driven off of the engine.
Stick with me for 1 second. Supercharging.
Okay.
Oh, just the verb.
The verb.
Just the verb.
Okay.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't ever want to get into verbs and nouns in this class. It throw people off. It's like, wait a minute, I don't want to sign up for an English class.
The act of supercharging.
The act of. Yes. Now, if I said a supercharge,
I don't have that.
Charges your phone.
which would be a
phone charger.
Supercharged belt driven.
noun,
Never heard of
would this be a noun?
What is this, English class?
What's your last name?
I actually had one of my students who sat right
S's and
here.
fives.
Here. Sat right there. He was an English major. He was a really very cool guy. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he works right across the street now. It'll come to me, but yeah.
We'll ask him. What's your name?
Supercharged. It'll come to me. Okay.
First name was definitely Mr.
All right. So a supercharger, that is gear or belt, especially for the purpose of this class, gear or belt driven. Compressor that boosts manifold pressure above 30 inches. And my note says you should look at slide 26 and 27, but I keep adding slides, so who knows where that could be.
So there's no such thing as a supercharger in a normalized engine?
That is, as far as I know, that is correct. There would be no such thing as a supercharged normalized engine. Let's see here. We talked about that. We got that. Okay, there we go. Centrifugal supercharge of the Bristol Centaurus radial aircraft engine. Why is it here? Because it's just beautiful. And that is an internal supercharger with what kind of...
That's not random parts.
I know.
Looks like a clock.
centrifugal.
Inside
Yeah,
it
like
looks
a watch.
it's
I
red.
told you.
Oh,
It's
it looks like
beautiful.
random
It is.
viewers
It's
laying
not
against the
powered.
wall. It looks like a nice angle photo.
Yeah, like
There we go.
Like an aerial photo.
This is a two-stage supercharged Allison engine out of the P63E. I don't know what that is. In this version, the initial blower stage compressed air prior to mixing fuel. The initial blower stage compressed air prior to mixing fuel. So if we just kind of dissect it, we have two-stage, 1, 2. All right, so air has come in, and what is driving this? Drive shaft. You see drive shaft, right? It's not exhaust gas. And so that's going to compress the air once. Smaller compressor, compress it twice into the intake manifold, into the cylinders.
Huh? No, it was.
After the
Army.
second compressor, how does the air go this way and then that way?
Well, it goes to the, we can call them inlet guide vanes if you want, and then
Yeah, after that. and
through, it looks like a little venturi right there, and then around, and I don't know, that's not important. I don't want to focus in. Oh yeah, this is fun. Let me see.
That's not a P63. Yes, the King.
Dojo.
Yeah, the P63 was a mid-engine aircraft.
What?
The P63 was a mid-engine aircraft because it was behind the pilot and the driver.
Oh, that's the one with the drive shaft?
And the cannon was through
Yeah,
the drive shaft.
that's
Yeah.
the, okay, they had all kinds of problems with that one because
It
of the
was
centrifugal.
The Russians
Oh,
loved
yeah.
it. We didn't.
So, all right, so I don't know. This is, stuff I pull off the internet. I'm like, hey, I want an example of something like this. And so this just happened to be the one. I was probably looking for something else. But anyway, for example, this particular one, according to the internets, gets a 75 PSI boost with a manifold pressure between 140 and 150 inches of mercury. It's running a 1,650 cubic inch V12 Rolls-Royce Merlin engine.
Bet you that thing.
30 PSI is what you said?
75 PSI.
75 PSI.
Yeah, I'm not going to write all that.
God.
Some of these engines actually used a two-speed compressor. You push in the clutch, shift the gear, and bam, the compressor would go off into, I don't know about the clutch bit, but anyway, you would,
The double clutch.
yeah, you got to double
The
clutch
later
it.
P51s did have it.
So, but there would be a two-speed blower, so low speed, high speed. So obviously low speed for thicker air, high speed, high altitude. Let's see. You saw the centrifugal. This is what I talked about the roots blower. So that name, and I call it that because, if I'm not mistaken, the roots blower can also be used for, they'll run something very large like this for cabin pressurization. But I don't know which engine would do that because cabin pressurization is nowadays off of bleed air, off the bleed air. And then one class had actually asked me, will they ever make any like a bolt-on that supercharger? I'm like, I've never seen one. And so then I looked for one and look at that. I mean, that's, if you're looking online, you can't because my picture's over here, but let's see. There you go. What kind of engine's that? You guys should recognize that.
Is that a 290?
Well, it's a Lycoming. Probably definitely not an O290. It's probably if you're looking for horsepower, the first thing you do is get rid of a 235 or a 290 and put in a 320. All right. If you got a 320, you're going to go to 360. So it's probably an IO 360 or no 360.
What if you had two tubes running along the cylinders?
I don't know what those are for necessarily. Let me think about that. These are the intake. That looks like an exhaust to me, but I don't really know.
It almost looks like blast tubes.
That's an insert?
Intakes are right here.
Yeah, it looks like
Is that ram air for cooling?
Ram air?
Do not know.
I don't know. There's shit welds.
Lasers.
That
You
is
got a
interesting.
pretty ass engine with some shitty ass welds on those.
Man, critical guy.
I'm just saying, man.
But it's a G3i, if you want to look it up, G3i supercharger has a 20,000 foot critical altitude. So why does it have a critical altitude?
Because that's normalizing the sea level.
For stops normalizing. It's just that good. They took it out, they tested it, and And found out, well, this thing's sea level all the way up to 20,000 feet. I don't know what its pressure rating is at sea level. I mean, maybe it's a lot. So anyway, I thought that was kind of cool. Like I said, over the COVID season, when I was working at, I tend to call it air repairs. I used to work, and that's what we called it, but now it's JetX. And that customer brought in his, I think it was 185 or 180 or 185 Cessna. Yeah, I think it had the 520 on it with that supercharger. Yeah, it wasn't underneath though. It was packed behind the engine, and some that they're like, wow, you can't see through back here anymore. It's like, what is that thing? It's a supercharger. I mean, you wouldn't know because there's just this packed thing in there. Like, wow.
It's just this mass.
Yeah. All right. I know. Look at that. That's just a
Is that a
Continental.
continental fuel injection?
Oops, I didn't want to do that. Okay, where am I at here? I don't need this stuff. Right. Is it break time? Well, we started kind of late, so I'm behind. So.
You got a minute.
Yeah, I got a whole minute here. So we're talking about definitions. Turbocharger, that'd be exhaust gas driven. Exhaust gas driven compressor. And then it refers me to a slide. So yeah, we can go with that slide. So from current slide. There we go. There we go. So there's your bolt-on turbocharger. This would be then a TSIO 550, I believe. Huh?
That's a really pretty engine.
It is.
It's got gear-driven alternator.
All right, so let's find the gear-driven alternator. So it makes it a what kind of case? Per mold. All right. There's my turbocharger.
Going up to an intercooler.
Going up to, what is this?
Intercooler.
A heat exchanger.
Heat exchanger.
Heat exchanger. I'll accept.
Is it like cigar lighter kind of thing?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Is it
Cigar
like
lighter?
cigar lighter, cigar lighter kind of thing?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, but it's, technically anything that exchanges heat be a heat exchanger, but it's an intercooler because what is it doing?
It's cooling the air.
Cooling the air. Now,
It's an air-to-air.
Cool thing too.
so who's got the turbocharged car in here? Anybody? Yeah. Do you guys have intercoolers on yours?
is that-
I don't think I've checked for mine.
No, most of them.
All right. What's the problem with throwing an intercooler on your car?
Restriction.
You gotta take the bumper off.
No.
Take that. There it is.
Well,
It's not a big deal, right?
No, not
What's the
really.
problem with putting it on an airplane?
Weight.
Yeah.
Ah.
Weight. It is a restriction. All that air's got to go through there.
Yep.
So you got to push a little bit harder.
They do make them fairly efficient.
How
but it's,
much do
it's
they
a-
weigh?
How much do they weigh?
On airplanes.
About this full. A little heavier than that.
It's like 5 pounds.
It's a
I don't
bit
know.
of metal in there.
Actually, I think I might
Piece of
have
aluminum. It's a nice chunk of aluminum. And there's two of them.
storage.
There's usually one on the other side.
Oh,
Doesn't have to be. This one may not because I only see one pipe coming up. Unless it's a dual turbo, which it very well could be. All right. So it's break time, huh?
Yes.
Okay.